Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. And today we're going to be hopping right back into our series where we are predicting every single Power 4 team's record by the start of the college football season. Today it's Texas Tech. Now, the Red Raiders really don't have that much of a weakness anywhere on their roster, just looking at it as a whole. And they also don't really have any superstars anywhere either, which kind of makes them like the epitome of an average team. However, their consistency across the board should be able to help them make another bowl game this season. The schedule doesn't look too terrible for them to be able to do that either. The game against Abilene Christian to start out the season should be a pretty easy one. Following that is a road trip to Washington State, one of the two teams left behind in the Pac-12 conference. That game should be pretty interesting. I expect Texas Tech will keep it close. Washington State's not going to be as good as they were last season. Back at home, they'll have 3 straight games with North Texas and then kicking off Big 12 play with Arizona State and Cincinnati. Neither of those teams are going to be super amazing teams in the Big 12 Conference this year. Cincinnati might actually be the worst one. Following that is a very difficult road trip, though, to face Arizona. Noah Fafita and the Wildcats may have lost their head coach, but they are still an incredibly talented team. They might lack a little bit of depth in certain positions. However, they have enough talent to win games like this one. After their first bye week is another home matchup, this time against Baylor on October 19th. Baylor also isn't going to be one of the better teams in the Big 12, but they should be good enough to make this game with Texas Tech very interesting. The Red Raiders, like I mentioned, also aren't going to be one of the best teams in the conference. Both of these guys should be right around the middle of the pack, so it'll be a pretty close game. 2 games on the road are after that one, with a road trip to TCU and another one to Iowa State. Both of these teams are right around Texas Tech's level. Iowa State might even be a little bit better than the Red Raiders. Combined with the home field advantage, that's going to be a pretty tough game to win. On November 9th, it's Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes coming to town. This game will also be a very good game, probably pretty high scoring. Colorado, I would imagine, is going to be the favorite, even though they're on the road. That one should be another fun one to watch. Their second bye week comes pretty late in the season on November 16th, but it leaves them well rested for 2 very tough matchups, with Oklahoma State being the most difficult one. That game is at home, but the Cowboys are one of the most talented teams in the conference and have a very good shot of making the conference championship, which means this is going to be a tough game for Texas Tech. And finally, to close out the season, West Virginia. Once again, this game's at home. The Mountaineers are going to be a decent team this year. They should be pretty solid on defense, which means this game might be a little bit more low scoring. The fact that it's at home does help Texas Tech a little bit, but it's going to be a really close game. It could go either way. Overall, they've got 8 total home games and only 4 away games, which definitely helps Texas Tech in their quest for a bowl game. And also, only 2 opponents are ranked in the rank and file top 25, another thing in their favor, giving them a schedule difficulty of only 3 out of 10. Taking a look at the guaranteed wins, the only one here is Abilene Christian, and there's really not much to talk about here. This just simply isn't a game that Texas Tech is going to lose. Kicking off the likely wins is a home matchup with North Texas on September 14th. This game's going to be a noon kickoff. Not really much hype building up to this one. Texas Tech is the better team. They are at home. North Texas might keep it interesting for about a half, but we expect the Red Raiders to pull away pretty handily. And after that one, they've got back-to-back games here, both at home against Arizona State and Cincinnati. We have these as 2 of the lower teams in the Big 12. Arizona State's probably a little bit better than Cincinnati, but neither of them are quite as good as Texas Tech. So, given that the games are both at home for Texas Tech, we do like the Red Raiders to be able to roll in these. We got a total of 6 toss-ups on the schedule. The first one's a non-conference game on the road against Washington State. Cougars lost a lot from last season, including quarterback Cam Ward, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the transfer portal. They're going to have a lot of work to do in order to replace the talent that they lost. They're also not going to be playing as high of a level of competition this season, given that they have to have a scheduling agreement with the Mountain West after being left behind in the Pac-12. So we do like Texas Tech to keep this one pretty interesting, even though it's on the road. It's early in the season, so it's a little bit more unpredictable, which is why this one's going to fall into the toss-ups. The next game is another home matchup against Baylor. This one's coming in on October 19th. This should be a pretty close game. Both teams are very similar talent-wise. It should be probably really just kind of an average game as far as scoring goes. I don't see it being either super high scoring or low scoring. Probably somewhere in the high 20s to low 30s. But I do expect this game to be pretty close. The very next week is a road trip to TCU. The Horned Frogs should also be a pretty decent team this year. I think there's a lot of teams in the Big 12 who are going to finish with around 6-6 to 8-4 records, maybe a couple in there at 5-7. So pretty mediocre as far as all of the different records go. TCU is most likely going to be one of those teams. They do have the home field advantage, which makes this a little bit tougher for Texas Tech, but the Red Raiders should be able to stick around for quite a while in this one. The week after that is another road matchup at Iowa State. This should also be a very, very good game. Iowa State is probably going to be favored here, given that they have the home field advantage and possibly a slightly more talented roster. However, this game should still be close into the second half. Colorado at home also falls under the toss-up category. Now, Colorado is getting a lot of hype yet again this season with Deion Sanders as the head coach. However, we think that the Buffaloes are a little bit overrated once again. They're still going to be a good team, and they're likely going to improve on their record from last season. However, we just don't see them as being capable of blowing out teams like this Texas Tech team. I believe this will be another close game for the Red Raiders. And finally, it's the Week 13 matchup with West Virginia. This game's coming in on November 30th. It should be another really close game. West Virginia is probably more talented on defense, whereas Texas Tech might be a little bit better on offense. The home field advantage will play a factor, and this should be a very, very close game. Finally, we have 2 likely losses to the 2 best teams on the schedule, the Arizona Wildcats and the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Both of these games fall in on the road. Texas Tech plays at Arizona on October 5th. The Wildcats are, simply put, just a more talented, more explosive team, and they will probably pull away pretty handily in the second half of this one. And then Oklahoma State, second to last week of the season on November 23rd. The Cowboys, kind of like Arizona State, are just a more talented team. They're going to score a lot of points, and we just don't really think that Texas Tech is going to be able to keep up with them in this one. Moving on to the schedule recap, we have the Red Raiders starting off pretty strong. The only really toss-up game that's kind of difficult is that Washington State matchup on the road. The other 4 are all at home. So the first 5 games really aren't that bad. They could drop the one to Washington State, but for right now, we actually have them winning that. So they do start the season 5-0. However, that game at Arizona is where they're going to pick up their first loss. The Wildcats, like I mentioned, are a very explosive and talented team, so this is going to be just a little bit too much for Texas Tech to handle on the road. Coming out of the bye week, we do have them beating Baylor and getting to 6 wins in only their 7th game. So that already meets their bowl game criteria, which is impressive given how the rest of the schedule goes. They followed that up with 4 consecutive losses. The 2 road trips are both toss-ups. However, we have TCU and Iowa State both as slight favorites. And like I mentioned earlier, we also have Colorado as slight favorites on the road. Texas Tech does drop all 3 of those games. However, each one of them is winnable. It's very possible they're able to pick up one of those 3. Following bye week number 2, we also have them losing to Oklahoma State. The Cowboys just simply are the more talented team. But to finish the season, we have them taking down the Mountaineers at home, slight favorites to end the season, and finish 7-5. Now, based on this, I actually think that Texas Tech has a decent chance to maybe get to 8 wins. They could definitely win one of those, or even 2 of the TCU, Iowa State, and Colorado games. I don't see them beating Arizona or Oklahoma State, but those 3 that I mentioned are winnable. And also watch out for the Washington State game. They might lose that one. So really, the projected record, I think 6-6 is going to be the floor. The ceiling, if everything goes right, is probably 9-3. Now, the projected record, as I was just mentioning, is actually going to be 6.7 and 5.3. So it's a little bit lower than the predicted record. However, I see Texas Tech as being a 7 or 8 win team. I like them there at 7-5 with this schedule, though. FPI also has them between 7 and 8 wins, 7.6 and 4.4, so almost favoring an 8th win there. And they have an 11.5% chance to make the college football playoffs, with a 0.3% chance to win the national championship. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in our next video.